Welcome to the Wednesday night live stream. We're so glad that you're joining us. If you are joining us live, remember you can make comments along the way, though I don't have my computer, so I won't read them. It's good to have everybody for our live stream discussion. Remember this series, we've been talking about the emotionality of Jesus, comparing some of the human emotions to the scenes that we see in the Gospels. And with me tonight are a wide section of the church body. Feeling pretty good about that, you know. Leslie, Kathy, my good friend Jorge, Tank, and Tom, right there. There you go. And so wanted you guys to weigh in. We've been taking the discussions from Sunday, so the sermons on Sunday and the topic, and then discussing them kind of almost like a small group format on Wednesdays, right? And so we discussed anxiety and worry on Sunday. And so now we're kind of circling back to go, okay, what do you think about that? Let's have a talk about anxiety and worry. How you doing, just personally, on anxiety and worry? Anybody ever found themselves struggling a little bit with anxiety and worry? Is that a struggle for you at all?
Yes.
Yeah, really?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah? Are you just saying that?
No.
No? Really?
No.
What do you worry about? I mean, you don't look like a guy who worries that much.
But you know who I work for.
Oh, that's true. That's true.
And
Worry about the boogeyman?
definitely not.
Yeah, no, that's not his worry. His worry about you just worry about keeping your job and keeping everybody happy and
Exactly.
all that stuff.
Yes.
What is it? What is? How does it usually manifest? The worry? Do you think is it like a narration in your mind? Is it like stress? Is it tension? What's the worry for you typically? What does it look like?
It generally starts from looking at my morning calendar and seeing what I had to do for the day, and it kind of manifests as anxiety. You know?
Anxiety?
Yeah.
You ever had it like so bad it became like semi-paralyzing? Not like physically, like I can't move, but like I just don't feel like I can.
In the very beginning, I did,
Okay.
but not anymore. You
Okay.
know, I've found a way to cope with it.
Cope with it?
Yeah.
Anybody else have it? Anybody else have that level of anxiety where it feels like overwhelming?
It can be absolutely debilitating.
Yeah?
Absolutely.
How so?
Yeah.
Like what's it manifest for you?
It ranges
Okay.
from next to nothing and to I just want to put my head on the pillow and put the covers over my head and forget the day's gonna.
Okay.
It can be debilitating.
Okay. Yeah. You're nodding like that's your story too.
You know I'm working through some things.
You know I'm working through some
You're privy
know why
to
you
some information.
You know I'm working through some
Yeah.
stuff.
I don't know why you even asked it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but general life stressors, whether it be work, relationships, or whatever, that brings in anxiety. Anxiety manifests how? Like overthinking it, over contemplating it. What are you doing?
Ruminating, overthinking, getting caught in this kind of feeling like I'm trapped in the midst of something that has already happened, but I'm like reliving it again, and it absolutely kind of incapacitates me at times.
Leslie, you're retired. You're supposed to be living a life of peace. Why are you got anxiety?
I don't have a whole lot of anxiety right
Okay.
now.
Okay. That's
Probably
good.
the most in my life right now is two of my children are entrepreneurs, which drives me crazy.
Yeah. Entrepreneurship is a huge stressor, you know. Feast and
They don't
famine.
seem to be stressed about it. but
You're stressed
Mom
out.
does it for them.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Gotcha. Yeah. So you're like secondary stress. You're stressed for something you definitely have no control over.
Absolutely.
Like zero control
Yeah.
over. Not even your problem.
No,
Yeah.
but I want to make it my problem.
You want to step in.
And they're both doing great. It's not.
Yeah, but you just want to step in and I got
Yeah.
you. How about you? You're like retired over there too. You should be living.
I live pretty good, except unless I got to go to the VA.
Yeah.
I stress out about that.
Yeah.
Doctor, I
Traffic's
see.
your biggest stressor, huh?
Not when I go to VA.
Road rage? No road rage. You figured all that out?
Didn't say that.
Okay.
That was last week's discussion.
That was last week's discussion? Okay. That was anger. That's right. Okay. So I spent a lot of time on Sunday developing this thought, and I want to see if it stuck out to you. I developed the opening, which was, hey, when you think about anxiety and worry, is that a sin to you, or is that a disability, or is that a what word did I use? I used sin or disorder. Right. Is it a sin or is it a disorder? Look at Mike pulling it up, man. He's on. He's on
helping you
point.
out.
He is on point. Sin or disorder, and so. And I just to fast forward for everybody who's listening to this and catching this for the first time, I basically developed out this line of thinking that said, well, it can be both, right? Like there's a point in which just general, normal human emotion can become something that is out of control. It can become this thing that is controlling us. Our emotions are not something we have; they are something that has us. Yeah, ooh, that's pretty good. Somebody
on a
tweet
t-shirt.
that, please, please tweet that. Okay, so that's pretty good. They can have us and they can control us, and anxiety is one of those that's a funny thing. And the illustration I gave was, hey, even in the garden, we find an anxious Jesus about an issue that is legitimate and it's not seen as sin. But he spends a good time in the Sermon on the Mount telling us not to worry and not to do this and to trust God. You know what I mean? So there's a point in which it's not sin, and there's a point in which it is. Mm-hmm. Do you know when that line gets crossed for you?
No, I cross it every day. Every time I go to VA, I'm scared.
Just
I don't know.
skates right over it. Just skates right into it.
That guy's gonna. I don't know if he's gonna touch me, and I gotta touch him back.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. What do you know when, like, because that's a legitimate question. It's a really interesting thing if you spend some time thinking about it. When does a normal human emotion, which is not bad, become something that is bad?
You mean fear?
No, well, anxiety is a little different than fear. It can't include fear.
I think it depends.
When you hang on to
yeah, but
Yeah.
I think it depends
You know what?
on the reason why you're feeling anxious, or because you can be anxious and worry about something that's good. Like,
Yeah.
my wedding, I was anxious and I was worried about it,
Yeah.
make sure everything was all right.
You wanted to make
And,
sure it was good and that
exactly.
your wife was happy.
And on the other side, there's on the other side of that coin, if you're worried, anxious about something that maybe you shouldn't be doing, that will bring a different emotion, because you shouldn't be worried about it. You shouldn't be
you anxious about you
about
gonna
it.
get caught.
Or even that, yeah.
Well, and then there's also the anxiety over not being able to like give something up, right? To like, I don't control this, God does. So if I handed it over, then I wouldn't have to be anxious about it.
Okay.
There's that, but then there's anxiety as a result of like something, some experience, some trauma or something like that. I don't think that's still something that should be worked through. Mm-hmm. But in that case, I don't think that's maybe a case where you need help handing it over, to work through some things to hand it over, But it's not just being like, oh, I'm just worried about this thing like all the time. One is, I don't know.
So I'm hearing two things, and let's go through them slowly, and we can kind of pick them apart a little bit. So the two things that I'm hearing is what and why. So what are you anxious about, and is it a legitimate thing? And there can be legitimate good things that aren't negative and destroying your life, and there can be things that you shouldn't be anxious about because it's bad. It's bad news, right? And then there's why. Why are you anxious? Is it because you want the best outcome and it's motivating you towards good things, or is it because you're doubting God? Like you're doubting that God's in control, that he's going to work it out for your good in the end, even if it doesn't seem like it all. You know what I'm saying? There's two really different things there, the what and the why. So let's start with what. What are you allowed to be worried about then? What are you allowed to be anxious about? And you know what I mean? Like, what can you be anxious about and not be sinning, so to speak, or letting it be? Vacation?
Vacation.
I get anxious about
What?
vacation.
Really?
Family
Well, I want it to go well. I'm like him. I have a picture in my
Anxious and
mind.
anxiety the same thing though?
Man, I just want to get.
I always define anxious as like something you're looking forward to.
Mike, help us
Anxiety-
out. Look it up, man. Google it.
Like I've always thought of being anxious for something is like I'm excited for it. Anxiety is like I'm almost
scared.
dreading it?
Yeah.
Ooh, that's a good question. Maybe
Kids are
we're, maybe
anxious
we're
for
getting
Christmas.
into semantics.
Yeah.
All right,
I'm
so
just saying, yeah.
well, think about it this way: like when Jesus says in the Sermon on the Mount, "Don't worry about tomorrow.
Right.
Tomorrow will take care of itself."
I think that's anxiety.
I think so too.
Yeah.
But a lot of times, like I'm like,
But you can
like
be anxious for tomorrow.
yeah, like you could be anxious, like when I have,
But I
Or
think,
two.
yeah, right. That sounds positive to me. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
yeah, well, that's what I guess that's what I'm asking is where's that line, and maybe it's semantics about how we're describing it, but I think there is a level of connection between the two concepts of worry, right? Like for me, when you said vacation, I was like, oh yeah, I do that because I have a picture in my mind of what the family vacation is going to achieve.
As soon as you hit the book button.
Right, right.
No,
We're
it's-
spending money and time and effort, and I think I can overachieve because my wife already has accepted it won't meet that picture, I'm saying in my head, I'm going to prove her wrong,
So,
right?
So when you go on vacation, you worry about what it's going
I'm anxious about achieving my goals of this like perfect family frolicking in the sand at the beach experience, right? And then as we get closer and closer, I'm plotting and I'm planning. Now, maybe that's good anxious. Maybe that's good. But when does it become bad?
when you plan like that.
You should plan, right?
When you go on vacation, man, you get a list out, you pack the car, you get your wife, make sure your wife's in because she's the most important. Then you get, in my case, I get Crystal, Cynthia, TJ, no boyfriends, no girlfriends.
Oh, dang. You know, you can let the girlfriends with the boyfriends come.
Right.
Shoot.
It's a family vacation.
Find their own ride. Yeah.
It's a family only.
I ain't paying for those kids.
Find their own
Paying for
ride.
mine.
Then you go to the beach, make sure your wife's got the checkbook.
No, I'm just saying, okay, so what's the difference between that, like, that level of anxiety over wanting it to go well versus like debilitating anxiety where like, let's say you've applied for a job or let's say you're going, you're going into work and you feel like you just can't live up to everybody's expectations or achieve everybody's expectations. And then that causes whatever physical manifestation, whether it's stress, tension, migraine, depression, whatever it is, right? There's this fallout that takes place out of it. And I'm not saying it only has to be bad outcomes that are the sinful one. I'm just saying, where's the line? How do we know when we're like being worried, like disobeying what Jesus has told us to do versus having some level of just general human anxiety that everybody has, that we see in Jesus from time to time too, right? That isn't wrong, right? Where's the line? Where's the wrong line?
Maybe it's when it's all consuming,
I think, yeah,
when it takes over your
It controls
thoughts.
you.
yeah, yeah.
That's gonna be tough. I mean,
Talk about COVID, talk about the election.
yeah.
Oh, sheesh.
I mean, talk about anxiety in people.
Yeah,
I
they were
wasn't worried
amped.
too much about the elections. I knew Trump was going to win.
Oh,
He was going to take
yeah.
away with it.
Well, you knew it wrong.
I didn't worry about it.
All right, what do we got here? Okay, somebody read that for us. What do we got?
As Charles Goodstein, MD, a clinical professor of psychiatry at New York University Langone Medical Center puts it, what makes anxiety a disorder is when people have anxiety that mounts to such an intensity that they're no longer able to cope with it.
Ooh.
There it is.
Okay, so what if we said this?
Anxiety a disorder.
Like, I'm gonna say this out loud. It's a running train of thought. It could be wrong. Let's discuss it for a second. What if the reason that anxiety crosses from human emotion into what we're specifically told by Jesus not to do, like we're specifically told to avoid, what if the line is when whatever it is, whether we deem it a good or a bad thing that have anxiety about, is directly connected, the what is directly connected to the why in a negative way. Meaning that if we're anxious about something and the reason is lack of faith, lack of trust, lack of peace, lack of, you know what I'm saying, abiding in him, then it's always sin, no matter what, if we think it's worthy or not, or good or not. Does that make sense? Like the what and the why, they can't be separated. They're two sides of the same coin. So like, for instance, if, hey, I go to work and I want to perform well, right? But the why over here is I'm doing it to impress people and not to live for God and just to be at peace in his grace and mercy in my life, then it's sin. It is what it is, you know?
But God's word doesn't say anxiety 1 isn't a sin, but anxiety 2 is a sin. It
Exactly.
says don't be anxious for anything.
Yeah, I know this. This is where we get into that semantics.
Yeah, but I feel like your answer right there, you can put that in any situation if somebody believes that.
What do you mean?
So, like you say, if you're doing something because you want to be more Christ-like or whatever, you know, you just justify a reason that you're anxious that still may be wrong, but you justify it just because you're doing it for what you think is the right reason.
Well, let me give you an example. Let's go back to the biblical example, right? So the example I gave on Sunday was Jesus in the garden. So it's just before the cross. He is, or at least for all like pictures of the story, he is anxious, right? It says he's sorrowful to the point of death. He's sweating blood. There's this intensity about the moment. But the why is not because he doesn't trust God or because he thinks God's abandoned him. The why is, for the first time in all of human history, the first person of the Trinity and the second person of the Trinity are going to be separated. So the why is a justifiable reason. It's not doubt. It's not lack of faith. It's the abundance of faith. It's if there was any other way, let's do that because I don't want to be separated from you.
just
I
a fact.
trust you completely. Does that make sense? And then he ends it with, hey, not my
Your
will, but
will.
yours be done. So, does that make sense? Like, so in that aspect, he's perfect. Like, anxiety is there, but it's not sin, right? Because it's abundant faith. It's abundant trust,
Right.
you know?
That's because he's afraid of being, I don't know if afraid's the right word, but he doesn't want to be separated from God. God and Jesus are the same person. You cut the person in half.
That's what I'm saying. Like, so there you find anxiety, but it's not necessarily considered bad. It's not sin, right? But the reason is the why. Why is it there, right? And I think that's important for people to know is that, hey, we're going to have moments where we're anxious. Ask yourself, why are you being anxious in this moment, right? Is it because you want the good? Is it because you want the good and you know what I'm saying? You want what's best for someone in your life. You're trying to bless them, whatever it is. Or is it truly that you're in doubt of yourself? You're in doubt of your performance. You're in doubt of what you'll achieve. You're in doubt of getting what you want. You're in like, what is it that's
Or maybe
driving?
the fear of the unknown.
Yeah, the fear.
You
Is
know.
it fear? Is it fear based? I can't.
You know,
Mine's
like say you're
fear-based.
getting a job, you're anxious about if you get it or not. Let's say it's between two people. You want the job, of course, not to be better than the person that doesn't get the job, but of course that you want to better yourself, you know what I
Right.
mean, which and then will make you a better Christian, hopefully,
Yeah.
or whatever, you
Yeah.
know.
No, I think that's a fair example. That's a perfect example. Like, okay, so let's use that as our test case.
I
Okay.
don't think there's anything sin related into that. I mean, I think that's a fair.
Well, it could be. So
You
let's
know?
let's go through let's
Yeah.
make it a test case. Let's say you're applying for a new job. Let's make Jorge our test case, okay? He goes to apply for a new job. There's like 5 or 6 candidates. It's a big time sought after job. He knows it would be a huge blessing to his family. You know what I'm saying? He's really hoping he gets this. His life has been miserable at his work. Blah 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 blah. The whole story. You know what I'm saying? Everybody's heard this story, right? And so now he's in the waiting period. He's done the interview, and you're right. The tension's setting in. He's not sleeping well. He's got, he's worried about will this happen? What would I do if it doesn't? All that stuff, right? You got to ask yourself at that moment, what should happen for a believer? What should a believer do?
Release it.
Yeah, but how? What does that look like?
This is in your hands, God. I mean, in a practical sense, I've done that before. I bought a house before where towards the end of the closing, it was just kind of a nightmare, and I was just like, man, I don't even want this house anymore, and all this stuff like that. And I was just like, forget it. I'm not jumping all these hoops. And you can't call me at 5 p.m. and ask me for all these, stuff like that, right? But then, I would just kind of pray about it and just kind of get to a point where I said, God, you've got control of this anyway. If this is gonna happen, it's gonna happen. If it's not, it's not. And aside from me just submitting what I have to submit, that's all I can do. And then on those days that I did that, I swear it seemed like, oh, things moved. Like things happened and moved. You know, it was the days that I was just like, like rage about the rage quit that
Yeah.
like, you know, everything was just kind of overwhelming. But in releasing it and saying, it's in your hands. I
How
can't
long
really
did it
do
take
anything
you
about
to
this.
finally release that?
Was that, that's
That,
a great question.
It happened a few
Yeah.
times in the
Yeah.
course, you know, but you know, every time it happened, I was like, this is why I just need to release this whole process. But then, you know, something else would happen. It's like, oh, you know.
Yeah.
But like I can attest that there's several times in my life where that's
Yeah.
happened, where it's like, it's at the moment that you like let it go, that it gets
I totally
better,
agree with you.
know?
But
It's-
I would spend a lot of time for that pressure to build up before I finally get to the point where,
Oh, definitely.
you know what, Jesus, it is in your hands.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because you try to control,
Exactly. You know, you try to cope with it.
I mean, there are things that we should be doing in any process, but
Yeah.
there are things that, look, you can't control your way out of
Definitely.
this. You
Yeah.
know? So
Definitely.
We can do as much as we can do, but when it comes to the final outcome, if we don't put our problems, or if I don't put my problems in God's hands, I still have the same problem every morning I wake up. It's like when Kathy goes to work, I'm truly scared that something's gonna happen.
Yeah.
She's been in a wreck before, and I don't ever want that to happen again. And I worry about then when I finally come to the point where I say, well, you know, I can't do anything about it. I pray to God, and after the prayer, I feel pretty clear about it.
Yeah.
Same way when she's headed home, I can't help her. I can't get out there and make sure no one pulls out in front of her and no one sideswipes her. I just have to put it in God's hands and let it run. Same way with my grandchildren. You know, when I ask God to help, I don't want to sound like God is the only person I've been able to count on 100% of the time for my 65 years. God is there for me every time I ask. Sometimes I don't see what God's doing, but if I'm in a pinch, I can ask God to help me. He has never left me alone with Kathy or the children or the grandchildren.
I was thinking when you guys were talking, this scenario in my life that comes to mind was with our first adoption, when we adopted Braxton. We got to this place, right? So we were foster care parents. And I don't know, my anxiety might have been different than Kat's, but we got to a place where what I realized was about to happen was, and I remember pulling the guardian ad litem aside and telling him this, and he was like, he had some pretty interesting words for me, but I said, I'm not worried for me, but I am worried for her, because she gonna go crazy. We don't get this baby at this point, because we had dumped like, I don't know, well over a year, and she was in love with this child, and that child was in love with her and me. But I'm saying, you know, when they're that young, they need
Yeah.
their mamas, right? It was like, and I was like, if the court decides last minute to yank this situation away and do something crazy, hand this kid off to like somebody that's not been in the picture, I'm gonna be married to a crazy person. I was scared for me. You know, I was like, I'm about to be married to an insane person, and I'm not sure what we're gonna do, right?
Yeah.
Like, we do not have the insurance to institutionalize this woman, right? You know, so but it was the fear was not lack of at the time. Maybe it was, but the fear didn't feel like lack of trust in God, because we had done some praying. We had like, God, this is in your hands. The fear was the unknown about like, hey, what's about to happen? I can't control this. I can't control these outcomes. And I remember saying like I remember saying to the eldership and to Bill and a couple of the guys that were always asking me about it. They were, you know, we were praying through it together, and I had done enough things behind the scenes. I had like we would go to, like, we can give you an example. We'd go to like a foster care thing, and I would immediately scan the room and go, okay, who's the head of the guardian ad litems? Who's the head of the DCF? I would find them and corner them in the room. Hey, I'm Mike Talon, blah, blah, blah. We have a kid that we've, blah, blah. And I mean, I was working it, boy. I was working. Let me tell you my story, blah, blah, blah. Let me tell you why it would be a good situation for this kid stay. And, you know, you could see their faces, and I was like, I have done everything in my power to plead my case and to, you know what I'm saying? We were even at a function one time with the judge, you know, and I remember she was like, can't talk to you about this, walk away. You know what I'm saying? Okay, you know, it was just, you do all that you can do, and then there's nothing left. You know, you got to just turn that over to the Lord. Now, all that was for the good, and so it didn't feel like this bad thing, right? But at some point, that even a good thing can become, hey, you're not in charge. You're not God. You're not, in control, and you've got to hand this over. I think that's what you see in the garden with Jesus. That moment where the line is, "But your will be done." Right? It's right up to the line of like, hey, where worry and fear completely takes over and becomes debilitating, and hey, I trust you, and I hand it over. That's a weird human place that I think we find ourselves in a whole lot more than we think about.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
But why can't we go to that place first
I don't know. It's
and
scary.
trust?
Because we're human.
Right.
I think
We're
we try to
broken.
cope with it.
Yeah.
I think that we think that we can handle it. It's just human nature. To
We're
try to,
frail, but we think
Yeah.
we can get the outcomes. We can manipulate, control, pull strings. You ever been around?
Because there are some things that we should be active and do our part in.
Right.
But at the end of the day, to believe that we can control the ultimate outcome. There's so many things that we should plan out. We can't just let the cards fall where they may.
Right.
But even with you doing everything right,
Things still go.
You
you
ever
may
been-
not be able to determine the outcome by
Yeah.
just what you do.
You ever been around somebody that's like really wealthy? Like really super wealthy? Like they always default to this.
Oh, I'm sure.
What's it going to cost? Literally is the line. That literally at some point that's what they say. If it's something they want, they're trying to control. It'll always be like, and you would do the same thing. If you were super wealthy, you'd do the same thing. You use the tools that you have, right?
Right.
And so you just go, okay, what's it going to cost me? I know there's a number somewhere. You know what I mean? And
But
it's
that
like,
guy's probably not anxious about it either.
well, maybe not. I don't know. Maybe he's used to getting what he wants. I don't know. But it's like we try.
Money will grease the wheels. Money will grease the wheels.
Sometimes it is. Okay, last question. I made a note of this as we were talking through on Sunday, is that a lot of times we don't think about worry or anxiety as a sin, right? And I said even to the guys earlier, I said, you could come here to the church and be a worrywart, and you could be an anxious person. You could worry about a lot of things. You could worry about the whole world coming apart and God not being in control. And probably no one's going to challenge you on it. I mean, maybe if you're in a small group and said too many things, they'd challenge you. But for the most part, you can probably we could fill up pews of people who are pretty anxious about things that are taking over areas of their life or their family or their worldview or whatever. Never get challenged on it because we really don't think about it as a sin.
Right.
But dang sure we have certain sins that we do. You know what I'm saying? It's like these sins, though, nobody's sliding on. And we're going to talk about those sins. And the people with the anxiety problems who are in sin are talking down to the people who have the public sins as if they don't have any sin. It's interesting, right?
Yep.
It's like we think, well, that's just anxiety, right? That's not that big a deal. I take Prozac, right? You know what I mean?
It's just a mental disorder.
Yeah, it's just a mental disorder.
They may
right?
be anxious about the prevalence of that sin.
But they're
it's not me,
super
it's them.
concerned about, whatever addiction sin, whatever sexual sin, whatever sin, and they are happy to speak to those people without any grace, without any mercy, without any kindness, and never think to themselves, oh yeah, Jesus did tell me not to be doing this very thing about anxiety and worry that I am doing. Like we don't think of ourselves as sinners that much. We think of somebody else as sinners. Have you noticed that?
No, I just know you better leave the crazy people alone.
Leave them crazy people
They'll come
alone.
and sit next to you and talk about it. Yeah.
But you know what I'm saying? Are you with me on this? Like it's one of the things about churches that even the best churches, and I think our family here is pretty awesome, but we're tempted to think of ourselves as not very sinful, that our sin problems aren't that big a deal, and then look at somebody else's problem and go, but that is. But
I
that
don't
is.
see that a lot in this church.
No.
I've seen it in other
Yeah.
churches.
Yeah.
It might
But
not
you
be
don't see
public
that here. True.
Yeah.
And we were just talking about it, not too long ago.
Yeah.
Just it's kind of tied in on what you can see, what you can't see, and how people look at themselves, because if you look at yourself as one of those, holier than thou people, then you're going to come off that way.
Yeah.
But then it's going to become more public versus somebody who doesn't, but still have the same acts. You know?
Anxiety is an easy sin to overlook, though,
Oh,
isn't
man.
it? I mean, no, lack of trust and worry and all those kind of things, and controlling and all that kind. That's an easy sin to overlook.
There's a lot of different labels associated with it. It's not anxiety. I just don't trust you.
Right, right.
You know?
Yeah, that's
Do you
true
think
too.
that we have anxiety more often, that it's easier to, like, do people recognize that anxiety is a sin? Like, you know,
That's what I was trying to point out Sunday, is that I don't think we give Jesus' words in the Sermon on the Mount or the other explanations that I gave in the New Testament, Matthew chapter 10 and others, where we're explicitly told not to let worry control our life, right? That we're explicitly told this is not something that people of faith do. They have faith in God. They trust Him, right? Yet, you know, the numbers were shocking. 1 in 7 will have a clinically diagnosed anxiety disorder. And if you do, I'm not trying to shame you in any ways. Like, that's just a legitimate problem in our area of the world. And the numbers are just crazy, you know, extreme of people that are either clinically diagnosed with it or medicating themselves because of that, whether that's from a doctor or for themselves. And those are just the ones that are clinically diagnosed. That's not to mention all the people who are medicating with alcohol and everything else to deal with the anxiety. The numbers are crazy high, right? And so here we are, churches, we're just like everybody else. We're just as broken as everybody else. People filling up churches. Some of us here are struggling with anxiety, but we never even thought about it as an issue of lack of trust in what God's doing. You know what I mean? Or a part of, like, that our faith should be kind of growing and changing the way we move through the world, and that should include our thinking surrounding the things we get anxious about or worry about or what we're worried about or how we're worried.
I think you talked about earlier about the levels, you know, like, you know, you can be anxious. Me, I'm anxious. I got a new baby.
Oh,
And, you know, we dress her and have her all nice and pretty, shining like a diamond in the morning. And I'm anxious that she keep her outfit clean. You know?
You gotta get over that.
That's what I'm, that first cherry, I just know she's going to.
they're rubbing all over the.
You know, and I'm like, you know, that's not the same level as what we're talking about, you know, but
It's
if
funny.
you boil
It's
it down,
funny though.
is it the same thing? If you boil it down?
You're right. It's funny too because we're all very tempted to justify our anxieties as ours are okay. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that's okay. You know, yours,
Yeah.
Yeah.
COVID or whatever, or this, or your job, or political, or relationship, that's not okay, but mine is okay. Yeah. Which is another weird thing about anxiety.
But it also goes to when is it okay and when is it sin?
Yeah.
Like, you know, is that really a sin? I want my child to stay clean.
No, I don't
Exactly.
think so.
Or exactly. You know.
And think about it,
If
like,
you worry about it all day long and, you know, it's like you're
If your
holding-
child's not allowed to do
you're-
anything of the,
Yeah.
it's like, all right.
we got some
might be.
hey, we do got some helicopter parents out there. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it could become a thing.
Yeah.
You know,
How old
true
is he?
story.
15 months.
15 months.
Yeah, 11,
No,
12, 15 months.
that's a perfect. It is really a perfect example, right? Is
Oh, no, I got plenty.
is the baby's outfit getting covered in
Yep.
whatever?
Yes, sir.
Is that really a sin? Probably not. But I can't tell you how many parents that we deal with that really struggle here, like because we have a lot of relationships here through the school where we're dealing with parents and making connections and working with families who are absolutely consumed with controlling the outcomes of everything about their child. It is the main thing in their existence, is to control every potential possible outcome. And even as I'm saying this, there's someone listening going, yeah, but that's the right thing. And I'm like, is it? Have you turned this over to God at all? Like, is God in charge or are you at the end of the day? That's the first thing. We only ask 2 questions when somebody dedicates their child here at the church, right? We say, will you raise them in a home where the name of Jesus is lifted up? And will you raise them in a way that recognizes they're a gift from God? They're not yours. right? They're his. You know what I mean? Like, and so yeah, you're right. There's a point where that's not a sin, but it can become. It can become a weird thing, man, where like
Right.
things
Yeah,
are
it
out of
starts
control.
somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It starts
Well,
somewhere.
when they get older and you want to fix their brokenness.
Yeah, you're still dealing with your adult kids, and you're like, I gotta control the outcomes there.
I've kind of let go of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Earlier in life, it was,
Yeah.
it was tough.
Yeah. It gets tough.
I had a point of, God, how much more can I take?
Yeah.
Lord, I can't go
That's
no further.
probably a sin.
Or God, I can't fix it.
Okay,
You
yeah.
have to fix it.
Yeah,
And that
I
goes
gotta-
back to,
mean,
why
I-
didn't I do that first?
My faith growing has allowed me to do that more.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
you know, this was bad juju. And
Yeah.
after I said that, my ex-husband committed suicide.
Oh man.
So
Oh man.
I'm not going to ask that question anymore.
Right.
And really try, you know, the outcome, looking back on it, was the best thing that could have happened for my kids.
Right.
You know, their dad in their lives was poison.
Right.
And they'll both tell you that today.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Yeah.
But it was,
But going through it was a nightmare.
going through it was a nightmare.
Yeah.
And, you know, my son had been in jail. He had just gotten out of jail, drugs,
Yeah.
did that with his dad.
Yeah.
And then this happened.
Yeah.
And
Brutal.
Yeah.
life still wasn't easy, but it just let me know that God was in control.
Yeah.
And you can just see it move through our lives.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's a daily grind. I think that moment, I think that example that Jesus gives, not my will but yours. And I gave that verse from Psalms on Sunday that just said, what do you do when you're scared? You turn it over to God. You know, you put your trust in Him. Like, it is a funny thing. Faith has to be activated, right? You can say you believe this stuff but when you're faced with real life situations, do you?
Right.
Do you stop and say, okay, God, I can do no more. I turn this over to you, right? And then after you've done it once, will you do it quicker the next time and the next time and the next time? Like, does that make sense? Like, I think that's what growing up in faith at some point looks like.
It's like, oh, I recognize that.
I've been there.
Yeah.
I've done this.
Let go. Let go.
Develop some muscle memory. So
Yeah.
next time
Faith
it's,
muscle memory. I love it. That's
When
true.
you get to that
Faith
place
muscle.
in your life where you're truly feared, where you're truly afraid, yeah, you turn it over to God.
Yeah.
And then every time you get in that situation,
Yeah.
you turn it over to God quick.
We had this phrase that we would say when we were going through that whole adoption cycle with a lot of stress and a lot of like can't control the outcomes and we have to turn it over. We would say, I'm gonna try to get this right. We would say, from the God perspective, we felt like God was saying, hey, I can protect Braxton without you, but you can't raise Braxton without me, right? And that was like, ooh, okay. That was we just kept saying that, you know. He can raise Braxton without us, but we can't raise Braxton without him. You know what I'm saying? It was like, hey, at the end of the day, he's in charge, right? And that's
Absolutely.
from a parenting standpoint, nothing worries you more than kids.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And nothing feels more out of your control when they get into like adolescence and all that kind of stuff than kids. I've got a couple, right? Just want
couple.
daily strangle. Yeah, I mean, because you just want to control the outcome.
You just want to control the
Yeah.
outcome.
Yeah, you just want, because you're thinking to yourself, I've been spending all this time, effort, and money trying to give you a better life than whatever, you know, and now you about to pitch it all away,
Yeah.
you know, so.
The intention's good, but you know.
Yeah.
You gave your parents a little worry?
Oh. No comment.
No comment.
No comment.
No
Beat
comment.
yourself up.
Man, listen.
No comment mean you're on a dusty side.
All right, well,
But they love you, don't they?
Definitely.
Absolutely.
Definitely. I remember coming home and telling my mom I was going overseas, man, and gee, ooh, it was rough. And I was there for 4.5 years overseas, and it was,
There you go,
yeah, it was rough. It was rough. So I understand.
all right, so the daily grind of saying, okay, not my will, but your will be done. I trust you with the future. It may not, last thing, it may not be enough, meaning that there are some things that are outside of just our mental control. Sometimes there's chemical imbalance. Sometimes there's real mental imbalance. Sometimes there's been mental injury. Sometimes there's things that happen in this life that are so extreme they have to be dealt with, not just with one prayer or just a slight change in thinking. It's truly an all-encompassing look at someone's health, right? And that may be true to some extent for all of us, and I tried to point that out on Sunday too, of like, hey, sometimes these are bigger, not than God, but that it's bigger than just some like easy, like Christian religious bumper sticker answer.
Like, why can't you recognize that?
Yes, yes. Sometimes these problems are, yes, that still has to be true. God still has to be on the throne, but we do have to address this chemical imbalance, or we do have to address this like actual mental disease. And we got to do with that with the tools that we have. And sometimes you got to see a physician, you got to see a doctor, you got to see a clinician to help deal with some of this stuff. That's an important thing. So we want to leave you with that tonight. Like, don't let our discussion tonight about this answer deter you if you know, and if friends or families or doctors have told you there's an issue here physically that has to get addressed also. Be humble, submit to that process, listen to your doctors. This is an important thing, okay? All right, thank you guys for joining us. We love you. Mean it. We'll see you